items in person and virtually via video conference or phone following opening remarks and administrative announcements. If you would like to present oral testimony remotely, please log in through the WebEx internet platform for meeting number 2492-223-0444 with password all caps ORPTAC hyphen 63022. Again, it's meeting number 2492-223-0444 with password all caps ORPTAC hyphen 63022. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public on the Commission's website. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones for the duration of the meeting. Commission Aide George White, would you please call the roll to confirm the attendance of commissioners at this meeting and the presence of a quorum?
Yes, Chair. Chair Mould.
Online.
Present virtually. Vice Chair Wong.
Present in person.
Commissioner Dean.
Present virtually.
Commissioner Legal is excused for now, or is excused. He may join us later. Commissioner Aki Peters.
Present in person.
Commissioner Pham.
Present virtually.
And Commissioner Stormy Gibson.
Virtual.
Thank you. Chair, you have a quorum.
Great. Given the presence of a quorum, let us continue on with our agenda and the business of the Commission. Commissioners, pursuant to Act 2020, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audio-visual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you will be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. On to oral testimonies. We will now proceed to testifiers. To those coming in remotely, please video conference from a quiet location. Also be sure that your microphones and cameras are in working order. For those joining us by phone, we will identify you by your phone prefix. If technical issues arise, I will give you a few moments to try to resolve minor connection issues. However, if it cannot be resolved, I will have to move on to the next testifier. When I call your name, please state your full name and the agenda item or items you are testifying on. Speakers are limited to a 2-minute presentation on each item. When the timer goes off, please conclude your remarks promptly. I will close testimony once all speakers have testified. I am not seeing speakers that would want to say something, I believe, unless Steve Takara or Janelle Denny want to testify on anything. Yep. Commissioner White, are there any persons present virtually or in person who wish to testify?
Chair, there are no in-person testifiers, and the commission did not receive any written testimony for today's meeting, and there are no virtual testifiers either.
There being no other testifiers, testimony is now closed. All right, on to the business. Members, turning to item number 1 for action on the agenda, the Commission was provided an update by the Policy Subcommittee regarding its position on the real property tax exemption under ROH Section 8-10.15, alternate energy improvements, recommending the Council to convene stakeholders to advise on successor legislation or amendments to Ordinance 21-32 to provide a longer-term solution amenable to all affected parties. Is there any desire to further discuss the recommendation of the Policy Subcommittee?
Vice Chair Wong here. I want to confirm, I guess, my understanding of the Policy Subcommittee's recommendation. And this is as it relates to the alternate energy improvements. The recommendation is to put essentially agriculture lands with alternative energy improvements and to have their tax rate or exemption be at the same ag rate as they would be under ag land, instead of having that increase based on the use, the industrial use that is being conducted upon them?
Yes, so there's a recommendation. Well, it's a sort of notional recommendation, right? In the proceeding with Bill 39 and what led to Ordinance 21-32, there was a lot of discussion about ways to go, and one of the approaches was an amendment to the bill that would maintain the existing tax classification that existed before the renewable energy improvements were put on the land. So that would, by definition, mean the agricultural rate. There was also talk of potentially recommending a separate rate for renewable energy properties as opposed to industrial use, because I think from the expert standpoint and the expert testimony given during the proceeding, renewable energy is not the same as industrial use that you would think of as like an industrial plant or industrial farm. It's not even like an energy plant as you would think of it in the conventional terms. It really is like solid state technology. I mean, other than perhaps wind farms, which might be, you might differentiate between wind and solar, right? But it's really not the same as an industrial classification. So it was either to provide some different rate or to maintain the existing rate of the property that it's on. Now, I think stakeholders are open to, my understanding is that stakeholders in that are open to different solutions. And that's why, there was really a rush because the tax year was coming up. There was a rush to sort of to close up issues that with existing projects that had existing contracts that were in sort of jeopardy of being breached because of the rise in costs that this caused. So the agreement was that they would do this interim fix, which was an 80% exemption off of industrial class, subject to a waiver request filed with RPAD, and then for the interim. So I think what the recommendation is calling for really is just to convene stakeholders and to find out if there is some kind of consensus approach that they could take. So we're not actually making a recommendation to go to any one approach, but the recommendation is to conduct that stakeholder process to search for a longer term solution.
Chair Mold, I may be in the minority here, but I just feel that our recommendations should be a little bit more concrete. I think that with our prior recommendations, we've tried to give, succinct and on point recommendations. And I think the council knows how to convene stakeholders. I think that's already implied in their process and in their deliberations. I just don't see how our own recommendation adds anything more. That's it. I don't have no objection to the actual recommendation. I just don't know if it's exactly in our wheelhouse.
I think with communications with council is they sought this out. Council sought out guidance to move this forward. And I think the guidance was to actually move forward with what the agreement was with the stakeholders who submitted testimony. And that's what this was. So this is just the recommendation is to get moving and to do kind of what they said they were going to do.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
Oh, and the other thing I should mention is that there was an attempt by the state. There was a state bill that was put forward, and in those deliberations, it sort of it sort of came to the front the fore that this is like the state really should get out of it, and it really is under the council and RPAD's sort of bailiwick to do this. So again, sort of pushing towards that. I mean, I think the problem was I think there needs to be more concrete analysis of recommendations from subject matter experts, and that's what that stakeholder process was doing. And I don't think there's been any movement on that stakeholder process since the bill was passed. So I think there is a need to make the recommendation. Yes, Commissioner Pham.
I appreciate what Commissioner Wong is putting out there about how the recommendation isn't really providing much of a direction. I know previous commissions had recommendations that stated a desire for the next convening commission to have a recommendation on the issue. I wouldn't mind seeing some direction there put into the report, just saying that the next commission should have more insight by this time, and if action hasn't been taken by the council, then we would encourage that next commission to offer a more direct recommendation.
I think that's a good recommendation. I think we can add that in. So, Commission Aid White, if we want to add language, what do we do? Do we go to the report right now and pull it up and just do it live?
We'll get to the report in a second. We can just working with just the policy subcommittee's report. If there's certain matters that want to be stricken or added, simply motioning to do so. So for example, with what Commissioner Pham just suggested, if there would be a motion to say the concluding paragraph as written, can there also be a statement to the effect of, in the event that no action is taken or no substantive action is taken by the council on this issue, the commission urges the 2023 ORPTAC to take a serious look at this issue and convene the necessary stakeholders to create a position.
I like that. Why don't we do that?
Well, it would be contingent on a commissioner.
Okay. Chair Mold, I move to amend the subcommittee's recommendation with the language proposed by Commissioner Pham and to subsequently recommend that as the final iteration of this commission.
Second.
Second.
Members, any further discussion? Okay, absent objection, do we have unanimous consent to approve this recommendation as just discussed?
No objections.
Great, motion approved, so ordered. Thank you, members. Turning now to items 2 and 3, suggestion revisions to the draft final report and the revised final report. With your concurrence, I recommend we proceed page by page, section by section, and line by line through this revised final report. Does that sound like a plan? We start off with each page.
No objections.
Okay, hearing no further objections, let us proceed page by page and then section by section, if need be, line by line through the revised final report. So I have.
Chair, would you like me to be the?
Yes, please. Please do. Commission Aide George White, could you please take us through the report?
Okay.
Very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioners, turning to the revised report with the footer draft V 6.29, which was provided to you just before this meeting. Date June 30th, 2022, to Honorable Chair Waters and council members of the Honolulu City Council from the Oahu Real Property Tax Advisory Commission. Subject, final report and recommendations. Recommendation on this page would be to strike draft, obviously, upon final approval. Turning to the contents, the purpose of this final report is to provide the final recommendations of the 2021 to 2022 Oahu Real Property Tax Advisory Commission, also known as Commission, to the Council of the City and County of Honolulu, known as the City Council, specifically to 1, conduct the land value tax study, 2, evaluate real property tax RPT credits and exemptions provided in ordinance, review the existing residential RPT classification and discuss an alternative tiering and rate structure, and 4, provide follow-up comments regarding the Commission's interim report from December 2021 and status of its recommendations. I'll pause there.
No issues here.
So after each pause, Chair, if you want to solicit discussion, if there be any, and if no discussion or other than technical, non-substantive, or stylistic edits, the document will remain as is, absent motions or discussion by members after each section that I read. Does that make sense?
Right, okay. So members, we heard Vice Chair Wong, any discussion of this section from members other than, technical, non-substantive edits? Okay, absent any more comments on that section, I guess, what do? We assume that section is approved now? Is that what we do?
No. Just for
Yeah.
the informality.
Let's move on.
We're just going to move on, and then we'll come back. If thoughts come up later, commissioners can bring them up, but we'll just, next section.
Yep, next section, please. We'll go to the approval side on the whole report or any sticky issues along the way. Thanks.
Turning now to the next section, background. Under Resolution 17-112, 2017, as amended by Resolution 19-199, 2019, the City Council established the commission consisting of 7 citizens with the purpose of conducting a systematic review of the City and County of Honolulu, also known as City RPT system, its valuation methodologies, classes, exemptions, credits, and minimum property tax to make the current system more equitable and efficient. The commission acknowledges the repeated recommendation of prior commissions regarding the need for additional time to thoroughly and competently conduct its review and make recommendations. The commission is grateful to the council for their patience and support in extending the reporting deadline provided in the authorizing resolutions to allow the commission adequate time to do its work. I will pause there.
Any issues? All right, no. If no one brings up any issues, let's move on. Commissioner Wright.
Turning to page 2. As such, the commission previously submitted an interim report to the council on December 29th, 2021 that addressed 2 matters. 1, the need for greater transparency in the processes and work of the city's Real Property Assessment Division, also known as RPAD, within the Department of Budget and Fiscal Services. And 2, a new or supplemental tax classification related to vacant, empty home residential properties. The commission acknowledges and appreciates the ongoing efforts by the City Council, that should be council, to address the recommendations included in the interim report and provides brief follow-up comments regarding them in section 5 below, but I believe that should be section 4. In highlighted text, the commission as a whole and its subcommittees met dozens of times over the course of the past year, holding placeholder public meetings to discuss and insert summary of commission activities. And then there's a bridge for anything else that commissioners wish to discuss. I'll pause there. I noted some technical changes, but the insertion of the chronologic and I guess historical record of the commission and its subcommittees can be done by myself as a technical insertion. It's not necessarily substantive. I think the only question is the extent to which how detailed the commissioners wish to get. Number of meetings or number of people that testified, how detailed the commissioners wish it to be. And then any additional comments in general, but also any type of bridge have.
May I just ask a quick question? This is Commissioner Bean. I know we had some earlier discussion in the very first couple of meetings that we held, having to do with a better timeline or schedule for commission meetings to, I think it had to do with a different start date or a longer term in order to be able to more adequately address this. I think we were talking about starting the meetings earlier, because as it stands now, we're right up on top of the some of the council decisions, and that's the reason why we had to extend our deadline for the report. Did we ever come to a conclusion as to whether we would be making recommendations to that?
I'm not aware of us coming, coming to a conclusion on that question.
Is that something that we would like to suggest, or are we okay with keeping the timeline as it is?
Well, I do think there is flexibility. Yeah, it's not ideal, but there is flexibility, right, in extending, to the extra 6 months that we got ourselves to finish up the report. But it was a rush to get that interim report in based on, the legislative calendar and needs, right? I do know that related to the renewable property tax classifications, there's an important reporting date coming up where the exemption applications for those projects need to be filed, like coming up soon. But I mean, so things like that happen all year round. So I don't know if there's a perfect solution because there are different deadlines each time. Commissioner Pham?
Yeah, I think it was less to do with the city council's timeline on passing bills and had more to do with budgeting, and that the timing of our work and a recommendation coming forward having an effect on the budget. If it were a recommendation that would be enacted, then there isn't enough time to factor all the changes in for the next fiscal year. So just realigning the schedule so that recommendations could be implemented in time for the budget to include those, I think was more where that discussion started.
Mm-hmm.
And Chair, so Commissioner Bean, I guess for the purposes of discussion, the opposite end of the spectrum would be currently it's set by fiscal year, but would, based on the commission's experience this year, which actually you all pushed the envelope to be able to maximize your time for a full year, but would it be beneficial for the commission to begin its work January 1st, experience the budget process as it's going along, doing whatever the commission decides it wants to do, and then it has kind of a 6-month or more window in which it addresses things for the next budget season through the end of the year. And then that way, January 1st of the following year, the commission's done, but any sort of actions could be well on their way to possibly being introduced or entertained by the council. Basically a January 1st to December 31st setup instead of the fiscal year setup that is currently.
I believe that was part of our discussion. If our role is to make certain recommendations, then those recommendations ideally would come at a point where those recommendations could actually be useful for that specific year. I don't know how difficult it would be to make changes to the start time, but I do remember us discussing it, and I just wanted to clarify whether that was something that we wanted to include in the recommendation.
So if we were to include that, that sounds like a whole section, like a new section for recommendation. So Commissioner Bean, am I hearing a motion to amend the report to include a section on a discussion of the timing?
I'm not sure that I'm ready to suggest that or make that motion. I'm more curious as to whether or not you, the rest of you, feel that that would be necessary.
I think that the flexibility afforded by us in this current session um, is sufficient. I don't know if we need to detail to the council that subsequent commissions will need more time. I think our opening sentences in the background saying that there was an extension of the reporting deadline allowed us to complete our work. I think that should be enough to explain that it may take a little bit longer for subsequent commissions to finish their work, but I don't see the need to recommend further changes to the structure of the commission.
Mhm. I don't think the issue was the length of time. I think the issue was the start date and how that impacted the ability of the commission to make recommendations within a certain time frame that would be useful to the council.
I sort of have, I kind of have concerns with like timing the commission's work so explicitly with the budget cycle. You know what I mean? Like we're sort of an outside commission making recommendations. Like I wouldn't want us to be considered sort of part of that schedule because it's maybe. I mean, I'm just throwing this out there as a suggestion. Like and so I would agree with Vice Chair Wong that I think we have a lot of flexibility and that man, the budget calendar and the budget cycle for the city is challenging to say the least. And there are a lot of timing mismatches that occur. So I don't know if we're gonna, you know, I don't know if we should chime in on that at this stage.
Okay. I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, any further discussion on this section?
Is there any desire or wordsmithing from any of you as to a bridge of any sort saying, you know, this final report, equity, yeah, you know, some sort of gallant statement of some sort? Is there any desire for that? Or is it fine just basically with the technical commission met this number of times? These are the activities they did. These are the topics that were covered.
How about in light of the commission's goal of equity and efficiency, this final report outlines, you know, the commission's recommendations, you know, done, something along those lines. In light of the commission's, you know, charter or mandate to provide, you know, to provide recommendations to ensure equity and you know, and efficiency in tax policy, this final report outlines our recommendations or something like that.
Is there a motion to that effect from anybody?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Hearing no objection, motion approved. So ordered. Well, moving on. Yes, Commissioner Pham.
I have one technical issue on the number of meetings. So yes, I think that is good to include. Would it be a technical change or would it be a substantive change to name the subcommittees in parentheses following the word subcommittees? Just because I know that we added a committee with this commission as opposed to the three that other commissions had done.
Makes sense to me. Seconded.
Yeah, that can be technical. Those types of things are very like technical and similar to the 2019 commission report. We can mirror that type of language of laying out the structure and framework of the commission as it was composed for this year.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Continuing on, Section 1, recommendation for a land value tax study. The commission discussed options for long-term equitable changes to the city's RPT structure. Land value taxation was discussed and explored by members of the commission's subcommittee on rates and classifications. The reason and importance for discussing land value taxation as a concept is due to the high cost of land being the most significant contributor to the high cost of residential property in the city. The subcommittee reviewed a Portland State study, footnoted below, modeling the effects of a land value tax in Multnomah County, Oregon. The cost of this study was $35,000, paid with a foundation grant. The study modeled the effects of a split rate tax, that is a property tax composed of separate tax rates on the value of the land and the value of the improvements. The commission received expert testimony at its October 21st, 2021 meeting from Dr. Tom Gearing. His testimony included information about the Portland State study as a member of a community organization that supported its publication and provided commissioners an opportunity to ask questions about various technical aspects regarding land value taxation. I'll conclude this section with the first paragraph on page 3. The commission believes its other recommendations to improve upon equitable property taxation in the city should be considered before a change as significant as changing the current RPT system to a land value tax. However, should proposals be dismissed from further consideration or not produce successful outcomes, the commission recommends the land value tax be studied, utilizing the city's actual real property data with a primary objective to determine the optimum split between rates on land versus improvements, as well as whether and where a pilot program could be successfully pursued.
Members, any discussion, any questions, any wordsmithing or additional language you'd like to add to this section?
Vice Chair Wong here. A number of comments. The first of which is, since the language of this section itself seems to recommend this as a backup in case other recommendations are not heeded, I propose that we move this to section 3 and have the recommendations on exemptions and credits be section 1, and have the recommendations on the residential rates take the place of section 2. I think that just because this is essentially, it sounds like it's a backup recommendation, that it follow the primary recommendations that the commission provides. In addition to that, I have some other more specific proposed changes. I think that following the second sentence in the first paragraph, we should define at least what a land value tax is, because I think that's essential to understanding what it is. It's not really defined until the second paragraph after we discuss the study, in which case we don't know whether the study really considered a true land value tax or just a different specific system. So I would suggest the following language is the third sentence in the first paragraph, that a land value tax would apply different rates to land and improvements, period. In addition to this, I would also propose that the current third sentence of the first paragraph be revised to remove the reason and importance for discussing land value taxation as a concept, and just to revise to read as follows. Land value taxation would allow for better consideration of the high value of land being the most significant contributor to the high cost and assessments of residential property in the city. I think that's more prompt and to the point as to why we're considering a land value tax, because it would allow for a better consideration in both the implementation of rates and how we determine those. I think that discussing the concept and the reason and importance, just because the cost of land value is high, doesn't get us anywhere. But it has to be because the cost of land is high and we're using it to consider flexibility or something like that.
Vice Chair Wong, would you be able to, the land value tax would allow for, and it's striking the beginning of the third sentence. Could you just repeat the insertion starting with land value would allow for, or land value tax would allow for?
Certainly. So the sentence would read as follows: land value taxation, insert addition here, would allow for better consideration, and then strike from as a concept is due to, and then resume the current language with the high, I prefer value instead of cost, but the high cost of land being the most significant contributor to the high cost of residential property in the city.
Thank you.
No objections here. Are there any
It's a
objections?
second. I have a second.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's, if we're gonna, Vice Chair, would you like to go through all of them, or are you okay with at least tackling these first two that you recommended?
I guess I'll make the formal motions myself.
Okay.
The first motion is, I move to relocate the current section 1 of the ORPTCA final report to section 3 of the final report.
Second.
And to confirm, that moves sections 2 and 3 up to sections 1 and 2 respectively.
Correct.
Any objections? Hearing no objections, motion approved. So ordered.
Thank you, Chair. Second motion is to insert the following language into the first paragraph of new section 3 of the final report. As the
I think
third
we
sec-
can, I think we know what the language is. I think we're good. You can just say the language discussed, I think. Is that
Okay.
okay? Yeah.
I move to amend as discussed in our prior discussions.
Second.
Any objections?
None.
Hearing no objections, motion approved. So ordered. Is that, and that's all of them, Vice Chair Wong?
As to section 1, as to former section 1, current section 3, that's correct.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the reading. Commissioner White, please.
We are now continuing on page 3. We did the first paragraph already. We are turning to section 2. Title: Recommendations to retain, repeal, or revise existing RPT exemptions and credits. Commissioners, before I proceed, there is one change that you'll notice from the original draft that was 6.23. This draft, and it can be reversed if you all wish, but I essentially removed and footnoted those exemptions that the subcommittee and commission approved for retention, not revision or repealing. So the charts that we are going to go through largely primarily focus upon recommendations of the commission for revision or repeal. If the recommendation was to maintain or retain, then I have footnoted them below and removed them from the chart. So I think that cleaned it up a bit, but I leave it to you all to decide, and I'll continue with reading. Prior commissions have evaluated the effectiveness and utility of the myriad of RPT exemptions currently provided in ordinance. In light of Bill 42, 2021, which proposed to repeal all exemptions currently contained within ROH Chapter 8, Article 10, exemptions, as amended by ordinances 20-13 and 30-37, this commission held multiple public meetings, including one on March 17, 2022, which was noticed, published in the newspaper to solicit as much public input and testimony as possible regarding the city's current RPT exemptions. As a result of these many meetings and multiple discussions, the commission recommends numerous exemptions be retained and recommends revision or repeal for the following RPT exemptions. I'll pause there.
Commissioner White, could you move the footnote in the body to after retained as a technical matter?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hey.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I think we can now move on. I think, should we go through this one? I mean, so Commissioner White, did the prior meeting, did you make your decisions on each of these? Are we voting for full acceptance of this?
Yeah, so everything in here has been now approved by the commission. It can always be reconsidered. But as we walk through, I attempted, I believe, to catch most of it. But as we go through, you guys can correct me, or we can reconsider certain actions. But everything listed has been at least touched upon and discussed, and some position has been taken. One other minor technical thing that I just want to note in the paragraph above the chart, where the last sentence, be retained, move the footnote, and recommends revision or repeal. I think some sort of like qualifier as specified, so that it's not that they're recommending revision or repeal for all of them. So as specified for the following, are some sort of qualifier like that.
That works. Yeah,
Okay.
That's technical.
So if we want, I think moving forward, some of these we may be able to take on in a little bit of bulk, but I think definitely for this first one, I'll just read this one and then proceed to subsection A, which is located on page 6. So I'll proceed from there. Looking at the chart is standard across the board. It specifies the ROH section number, as well as the relevant description of the exemption provided. And I just want to double check one thing here. Sorry, hold on. Okay, yeah. So ROH 8-10.4. Homes, also known as the homeowner's exemption. I don't know whether you all would want that to be specified or not, or in parentheses. Recommendation is to revise. Recommend increases to home exemption. I think that should be homeowner's exemption. Amount to adjust for inflation and statewide property valuations. And then I don't know what the errant consider is, but discussed in subsection A below, including discussion on bills 7, 35, and 40 from 2022. Turning to page 6 of subsection A. Amend homeowners exemption and revise threshold. The commission has had extensive discussions regarding the homeowners exemption with unanimous agreement amongst its members that the monetary thresholds should definitely be increased. The commission deliberated at length regarding the best mechanism to determine the appropriate exemption amount, the equity of this exemption, and the extent of the limited relief it provides. Multiple measures pertaining to the homeowner's exemption are currently pending before the council and are summarized in the following table. The table lists the homeowner's exemption. Along the left column is the calculation of how to calculate or how it will be calculated, what the exemption amount will be. Second row is the amount of the exemption determined, and third row is the amount of exemption for those age 65 and older. And then on page 7, we'll continue on in that in a second, but completing this table, existing ROH homeowners exemption 8-10.4. The calculation is a set monetary threshold. The amount is for $100,000. And for those 65 and older, it is $140,000. Bills 7, 35, and 40 all have identical adjustments and recommended amendments or revisions to the ordinance such that the calculation is set, but it's annually adjusted according to the consumer price or inflation indices by RPAD. So it's an annual adjustment instead of a set monetary amount that changes only with revision to an ordinance. Bill 7 establishes the base at no less than $100,000, which the existing amount is $100,000. Bill 35 proposes an increase of $20,000 for the initial amount, so no less than $120,000. Bill 40 sets $110,000 with no qualifier of no less than. For those age 65 and older, similar for Bill 7, there was no change to the threshold amount. Similar for age 65 and older, no change. Bill 35 increases the threshold by $20,000 to $160,000. And Bill 40, similarly, like they did with the normal amount, increasing of $10,000 to $110,000 for the age 65 and older, amends it up to $150,000 from $140,000. I'll pause there.
Any discussion of the details of the table? Hearing no discussion, I think we can move on to the next section below.
Very briefly, if I can, just confirm with commissioners, turning back to page 3, I believe the consider notation in the box of the recommendation where there's an orphaned consider. I believe that was based on our conversation yesterday where commissioners discussed considering and I don't have the wording if you all have better wording, but it was considering a repeal or removing the applicability or availability of a homeowner's exemption to a specific quartile of properties assessed, basically like the top quarter. Maybe Commissioner Pham can articulate it better, but I believe the recommendation was that the council in its deliberations on the homeowner's exemption should consider not an outright repeal of the homeowner's exemption, but a partial repeal of it to a specified quartile of properties.
This is Vice Chair Wong. I think that based on my recollection, the best language would be to consider the exclusion of certain high value properties from the homeowner's exemption. And we decided to leave that either a percentile. We decided to leave that intentionally vague, so as to just provide a recommendation as to the wholesale policy.
Yeah, I agree with that. That sounds like the discussion yesterday.
And our commissioners all right with inclusion of that language in that box as discussed by Vice Chair Wong.
Vice Chair Wong, would you mind repeating that language?
Certainly. I'll make a formal motion. I move to amend the language of the recommendation for the homeowner's exemption after the semicolon and the word consider to be consider exclusion of certain high value properties from the homeowner's exclusion.
And that is making reference to, like, say, the top 5% of homes in home value, or
It could.
I know we're
yes.
leaving it vague. I just
Right. I think that we decided against including that language as a 1%, 5%, 25%. We just said higher value properties.
okay. Thank you.
Any objections to the measure? Does anyone second Vice Chair Wong's motion?
Second.
Hearing no objections? No objections? Hearing no objections, motion approved, so ordered.
Turning to page 7, the final section of the chart, as well as the final paragraph of this section regarding homeowners exemption. These 5 columns simply lay out the low income thresholds that are also included within the homeowners exemption, such that homeowners are granted an exemption up through a certain age, and then when they get older, there's a bump up in the amount of the exemption that they can claim. Currently, under the existing ROH 8-10.4, those 75 and older, 140,000. Those 80 and older, 160,000. 85 and older, 180,000. 90 and over, 200,000. Bill 7 actually all bills do not appear at this point to increase that exemption. They leave it as is. I don't know whether the commission wishes to comment upon that, or we could even, if the commission does not wish to, or actually I guess it would be the subcommittee representatives, but do not wish to dive into the older age group section of it, or if they're ready to have a position. I don't believe that the subcommittee took any specific position on the age bump up of the exemption amount.
Does anyone want to take on this subject, or do what Commissioner White outlined there, which is not to take a position on those line items, simply to state them in our report?
I agree with that. I don't think we've had any discussions on this topic, so we should leave as is.
Do I hear a motion?
No need motion if
Yeah.
it's leaving
It
as
is what it is.
unless somebody
Okay.
says otherwise.
Great. Let's hear the next paragraph.
The commission believes that Bill 35, 2022 provides a serious starting point to begin addressing the adequacy and equitability of the existing homeowners exemption. As discussed in greater detail below in section, I believe, I gotta double check the section number.
Yeah.
As discussed in greater detail below in section X, the council is urged to consider the possibility of repealing the homeowners exemption should a more comprehensive retiering and restructuring of the residential RPT classification and rate system be undertaken. So specifically, that refers to council or Commissioner Pham's section that he worked hard on, which is currently section 3, but I believe will become section 2. So I'll fix that as a technical change, but essentially it's the commission's report and recommendations as it relates to the retiering and restructuring of the classification for residential. This paragraph addresses that, and it's a little wordy, and I'll leave it to you all to discuss.
I think, do we want to say provides a serious starting point to begin? I mean, speaking of Vice Chair Wong's comments earlier in this meeting, there's a lot of wiggle room there. Do we want to say the commission recommends Bill 35, prefers Bill 35 as a viable starting point to address the adequacy and equitability of the existing homeowners exemption?
I had something along those lines of a revision. I would, I guess, just formally move to strike provides a serious starting point to begin addressing and replace that with best addresses. So it would read as follows. The commission believes that Bill 35, 2022 best addresses the adequacy and equitability of the existing homeowners exemption. Is there a second?
Second.
Any objections? Hearing no objections, motion ordered. So motion approved, so ordered. I think that works.
And I had one other proposed revision. This is more stylistic than anything, but I think the second sentence, the clauses should just be rearranged in reverse. So it should read, should a more comprehensive retiering and restructuring of the residential RPT classification and rate system be undertaken, the council is urged to consider the possibility of repealing the homeowner's exemption as discussed in greater detail below in section 4. So the clauses would just be read in reverse.
We can treat that as a technical, and I've noted it.
Okay.
Yep. Sounds good. Thank you.
Any further discussion on this last paragraph before subsection B? Seeing no discussion, turning to subsection B on page 7, historical properties, residential and commercial RPT exemptions. The commission recognizes that, I apologize. Returning back to page 4. Actually, we're not going to do the historic yet. Let's stay at least somewhat on target here. Turning to page 4 of the chart, ROH section 8-10.8, persons with impaired sight or hearing and persons totally disabled. Recommendation is to revise. Consider narrowing definition of exemption to homes only instead of all real property. Absent comment, I'll proceed. 8-10.10, charitable purposes. Recommendation is to revise. Define charitable purpose according to the Internal Revenue Service's definition of a 501c3 charitable organization.
I have a proposed revision here. I think that the subcommittee's recommendation was either to define charitable purpose according to the Internal Revenue Service's definition of 501c3 charitable organizations, or in the alternative, to rename the exemption title from charitable purposes to nonprofit.
I think that makes sense. Second. Any objections to the motion? We'll treat that as a motion.
No objections, and just to confirm for the record, so Vice Chair Wong, it is as written, which includes a or at the end of it, and it's or in the alternative, comma, to rename the exemption purposes for charitable to the
From charitable to
rename
a nonprofit organization.
from charitable to nonprofit.
That's correct. To rename charitable purposes to nonprofit purposes, as the language in the statute is.
Got it. Eight 10.12 crop shelters recommendation is to repeal. 8-10.15 alternate energy improvements recommendation is to revise, discussed in subsection D below. And I believe I have already inserted what was discussed earlier at the beginning of the meeting. It is on page 7, going on to 8. And that is essentially just a cut and paste from what you reviewed at the beginning of this meeting. And I have made a notation regarding the recommended and approved addition of the final sentence that in the event that no substantive action is taken, yada, yada, yada. So is there any comment regarding the chart for alternate energy improvements, as well as subsection D, as in dog, on page 7? Seeing no discussion, turning to 8-10.20, low income rental housing. Recommendation is to revise, eliminate the annual filing requirement by revising section 8-0.21 or 10.21 to resemble Kauai County Code, Section 5A-11.21, subsection B. Absent comment, continuing on. 8-10.22, historic residential real property dedicated for preservation. And with your indulgence, I will also turn your attention to page 5, 8-10.30, historic commercial real property dedicated for preservation. Both sections, one's real property, residential real property, one's commercial real property. Recommendation for both is to revise. Readopt 2019 Commission recommendation to increase the minimum real property tax from $300. Commission recommends that fully exempt real property be subject to a minimum real property tax of $1,000 and partially exempt real property be subject to real property taxes in an amount no less than $1,000. The same language is reflected on page 5 in the chart for commercial real property. I won't repeat it. I believe I've double checked that the language is identical. And note that, so both note that it is discussed in subsection B below. Is there any changes to the chart language, which I just read, which is identical for 8-10.22 and 8-10.30? Yes, Commissioner Pham.
I thought that we discussed yesterday the compromise was an or clause. It was or repeal.
I will proceed to subsection B, where I believe I touched upon that. But if you want it in the chart, that's not a problem. Perhaps if I can turn your attention to subsection B, and then that'll give you a little bit more context to decide how you want to phrase it. So turning to page 7, subsection B, historical properties, residential and commercial RPT exemptions. The Commission recognizes that there have been significant improvements in the administration of the Historical Properties Program as specifically addressed in the City Auditor's Report numbers 13-02 footnote and 19-07 footnote. The Commission reiterates the recommendation made by the 2019 Commission that the exemptions provided to historic residential and commercial real properties be amended to increase the minimum real property tax from $300 to $1,000. Should the Council concur with the recommendation to revise and increase the minimum RPT imposed on these properties, this Commission also suggests the Council consider whether the Historical Properties Program itself continues to serve a necessary and beneficial purpose to the city and its taxpayers.
I think the language in subsection B adequately reflects our discussions yesterday, but I'll leave it to Commissioner Pham whether he's whether that's sufficient to his liking.
I think using the word repeal somewhere in there would be warranted, like just at the end of the final sentence, therefore repeal.
How about right after "and its taxpayers," i.e., an outright repeal, or just repeal?
Yes. So I move to add a parenthetical, i.e., repeal, to the end of that sentence in section B.
Second.
Second from Vice Chair Wong.
Any objections? Hearing no objections. Oh, there's a yes.
Sorry, not necessarily an objection, but
Okay.
I also believe we discussed in lieu of repeal, a revision that suggests looking at the means, the ability of people to pay. I somehow don't remember voting on repealing it, but I mean, I'm okay with that. We did discuss means though, the ability, there being people in certain areas who are living in historic homes that would have difficulty upkeeping the home and paying the taxes versus others who have who are more than capable of paying the taxes in certain other areas. Let's say in Kailua, a lot of the historic homes here in Kailua. But if we're going to be if our recommendation is to repeal it, I don't believe we need to necessarily have that language in there then.
Right. I think I agree. Commissioner Bean's comments have refreshed my memory of yesterday. That was our discussion, that the evaluation was on whether or not those with the means to pay should receive the exemption. I think that a more appropriate modification to the second sentence in the second paragraph of subsection B should insert the following language. After this commission also suggests the council consider whether the historical properties program itself continues to serve a necessary and beneficial purpose to the city and its taxpayers and remains an equitable means of doing so.
Well, I think the maybe that would be better served by adding a sentence to this section, and to like qualify the means and ability to pay as a qualification, as a potential qualification of the exemption, whether it is raised or repealed or otherwise changed, perhaps, that be taken into consideration. So an additional sentence that the commission recommends that the exemption be considered according to a property owner's ability to pay.
Yeah, I mean, that should be a qualifier. If the exemption remains, then a qualifier for the exemption should be a financial need.
Yeah, that's kind of, if someone has a financial need and they have a historic property, shouldn't their reason for seeking property tax relief be something other than historic preservation of the property? You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of secondary to the need, right?
Right. I think the primary goal of the historic property exemption is just to promote historic properties. It's not really a need-based exemption, which is why I didn't understand the initial, I guess, consideration of need in this policy. Either it's worth it or it's not. I mean, and there's one policy goal that's supposed.
Sorry, you cut out, Vice Chair Wong.
I think there's one policy goal that is supposed to be furthered here, and then if the juice is worth the squeeze, then we keep the exemption, and if it's not, then we get rid of it. But historical properties, whether they're owned by rich people, poor people, whether or not they're expensive properties or a little grass shack, it's still a historic property and something that the exemption is supposed to further the preservation of. So I don't see the need-based language being quite necessary to this.
I might be wrong, and please correct me, but I believe that part of that is in response to the limitations on how you have to upkeep your property. There are certain things you can't just replace a beam with just any old beam. There are limitations as to how what you have to use and how you have to restore or maintain an historic property. I think that's part of the reason for the exemption. There are financial responsibilities beyond that of the normal residential owner.
That's consistent with my understanding.
So I think it's, yeah, that actually explains the need a little bit more, because it's sort of subsidizing someone with lower income and lower means to be able to execute on and do the historic preservation. So I'm okay with including that, like some kind of needs means testing language or something like that in this, some connection.
Commissioner
Is there a
Pham,
motion?
do,
No.
do you have a recommendation as to how you would word something like that? Would the wording be in response to like part of the qualification for a historical homes exemption being a income based?
No, I don't have a recommendation. Are you thinking that maybe we want to change the motion so the parenthetical might read repeal and or income
Subject
based
to
qualification
income qualification.
means test, yeah.
Repeal subject to means qualification. Repeal or adjustment subject to income qualifications.
I think that's closer to what I was considering.
One other, just as we're all spitballing, this commission also suggests the council consider, and then using that language of means-based, suggest the council consider a means-based evaluation or something to that effect. And whether the historical property, I don't know if inserting it at the beginning instead of at the end, but keeping the parenthetical that Commissioner Pham, essentially putting the equitable means stuff up higher in the sentence, and then the IE repeal just ends it.
Commissioner White, can you repeat where the insertion would go?
Second sentence of the paragraph. So should the council concur with the recommendation to revise and increase the minimum RPT imposed on these properties, this commission also suggests the council consider, and then insert means, equitable means test or means-based test, also consider some sort of means thing, as well as whether the historical properties program itself, and then continues on the whole sentence, and then IE repeal.
Yes. So I move to amend the motion to include the insertion after council
Second.
to reconsider a means-based qualification as well as.
Any objections? Any further discussion?
I'll note my preference for the current language, but I won't object with reservations.
We'll put do we footnote that? Vice Chair Wong had reservations, maybe. So I'm hearing that that's not an objection, Vice Chair Wong. So I'm gonna approve the motion, and so ordered.
Okay. Any further discussion regarding historic properties? Okay, returning to page 4 at the bottom of the page, the favorite topic, credit unions. And just to confirm with Commissioner Pham, you are fine with revise as the sole notation for historic properties? You had mentioned revise or something, but are you fine with just revise?
Yes.
Turning to bottom of page 4, 8-10.24, credit unions. Recommendation is to repeal, readopt 2019 commission recommendation to repeal RPT exemptions for credit unions owned real property, or for credit union owned real property, such that federally chartered or state chartered credit unions can be taxed at the same rate as commercial real property, discussed in section C below. And that is on page 7. And I apologize that I did not include it, but I'm hoping that Vice Chair Wong has his brain functioning and his wordsmithing ready to go.
Certainly. I think that just for a start, our proposed addition to subsection C as to the credit unions, this commission recognizes the numerous testifiers and testimony submitted by credit unions and the members thereof. This commission also recognizes the immense amount of public good that these institutions provide, particularly in the form of financial services to those who are not as well served by the institutional banks in the county. However,
And commercial,
right.
say.
However,
Yeah. Institutional, commercial, and retail.
sounds good to me.
Yep.
However, the prevalence of credit unions and the widespread use and number of members indicates that this exemption has outlived its purpose. Credit unions appear to be on nearly equal footing and openly compete with other financial institutions in the market. Due to the success of credit unions, they should no longer be entitled to an exemption of real property tax. And nothing further to add, but open to comments.
So is that the statement that, I mean, I saw that there was a vote on this in yesterday's commission meeting. I'm sorry I was not able to attend due to prior engagement. You know, I think if I had been at the meeting, I might have recommended, you know, a different approach on this one, which would have been to note that there was significant discussion among the members, with some taking that language, you know, that, you know, agreeing to and adopting this language, but others, including myself, thinking that needs to be more study and understanding of the impact of the credit union real property tax exemption. You know, my view is I'm not sure that they do directly compete with commercial banks retail banks, institutional banks, and that they are serving a market niche that would not otherwise be served. And therefore, it might be in the public interest to maintain this, even though it might have, it might not adhere to the express, in the original intent of the law to promote it, to promote credit unions. Yes, Commissioner Stormo Gibson.
Yeah, we had a discussion about this exemption yesterday, and I think there was some compelling facts even from the credit union data. One of them was that there's 980,000 members, or something very large, that they and Chair Commissioner Peters brought forward a good friend of his that says, it's really not the same environment that it was 20, 30 years ago. And they are really competing with banks for customers. So it seems like the concept that this credit is needed for them to be competitive is not so true anymore as compared to when it was started. And I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that, but we did.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Peters. As I recall yesterday's discussion, I don't think it was 900,000, but I think it was more than 500,000, which would be like more than half the population of our state. So it was a significant, oh, it was 971,000. Well, that's almost the entire population. And the story that I brought up, one of the things she said is basically about the 10 biggest credit unions. They're basically open to the general public. There's no, it's not very hard to get a membership like it used to be. So I think that was one of the key things in the majority of us voting to repeal.
Did anyone review the interest rates, the differential in interest rates on the different products?
We did review, and in some instances, particularly as to short-term loans being those less than 15 years regarding personal property, meaning not real estate mortgages, credit unions had a significantly better rate. However, in other instances, the rates were either equitable or in some instances, the standard banks had slightly better rates. There wasn't a noticeable difference enough to impact the discussions or the vote that we had yesterday, Chair.
Okay.
And
I'm just-
I just wanted to add that I think that the wording, and I'm gonna trust that Commissioner White will read it back to us, but the wording from Vice Chair Wong is reflective of the conversation we had yesterday.
I can go ahead and hopefully read my writing there. And I also have the recording, so don't worry. But here, this commission recognizes numerous testimonies received. This commission also recognizes the good work done by the credit unions to those that are not well served by institutional, commercial, and retail banks. However, I hate when I can't read my writing. However,
I'd say prevalence.
prevalence, yep, of credit unions and widespread use and number of members indicates that this exemption has outlived its purposes. Credit unions appear to be on nearly equal footing and openly compete with other institutions in
The financial market.
market. Due to the success of credit unions, they should no longer be entitled to an exemption of their real property tax.
That is accurate to my recollection. I move to formally adopt the language read by Commission Aide White.
Second.
I object. So let's go to a roll call. Is that what we do, George?
That is correct. With an objection, we'll return to a roll call vote. The, turning to a roll call, Chair Mould objects as a nay. Vice Chair Wong,
Aye.
Commissioner Bean. You can pass if you need to.
I'll pass.
Okay. Commissioner Legal is excused. Commissioner Aki Peters,
Aye.
Commissioner Pham.
Aye.
Commissioner Stormo Gibson.
Aye.
And returning to Commissioner Bean.
Object.
Okay. Nay for Chair Mould and Commissioner Bean. The nays have 2, the ayes have 4. The vote is 4-2. The motion carries.
Okay. Next.
Okay. Turning now to page 5. We're moving along. Here we go. Page 5 chart, ROH section 10.25 slaughterhouses. Recommendation is to repeal. ROH section 8-10.26 qualifying construction work. Recommendation is to repeal. ROH 8-10.29 nonprofit organization thrift shops. Recommendation is to revise. If the recommendation for amendment to ROH section 8-10.10, which is the charitable purposes exemption and recommendation, if the recommendation is enacted for 8-10.10, the commission recommends either adding a 501c3 specification to ROH section 8-10.29 or merge its contents into the amended ROH section 8-10.10 provision. Any comments? Okay, moving forward. We already addressed 8-10.30 historic commercial real property. Turning to 8-10.33 for-profit group childcare centers. Recommendation is to retain but revise. 2019 commission recommendation was to repeal, but this commission recognizes there continues to be a serious shortage of legitimate childcare options in Hawaii, regardless of whether the provider is for-profit or nonprofit. This commission does not want to make any recommendation that might make childcare any more difficult than it is presently. The commission recommends retention of this exemption, but urges the council to also consider a closer examination of the childcare issue more broadly and explore what the city's options are to more effectively address and alleviate the situation and provide greater relief in lieu of or in addition to the current exemption. Any comments? And I can reread it if necessary. You have it. No comments? I'll proceed. Turning to page 6. ROH section 8-10.34 Central Kaka'ako Industrial Zone Limited Development. Recommendation, we did not get to this yesterday. It was included in the draft report. It's included in the revised report. This specifically, these matters 8-10.34 and 8-13.2 were continued from yesterday due to time constraints, as they are recently pending matters that were recently introduced to the council. So it is fair game to discuss it, but it's similarly fair game for this commission to say, we may not want to address it. I'm happy to discuss the matters and then you all can do your discussion, figure out what you want to do. Specific to Central Kaka'ako Industrial Zone Limited Development under 8-10.34, hypothetical recommendation would be to retain or revise, or retain and revise. The recommendation of the subcommittee was to retain, period. The revision recommendation comes in light of Bill 38, 2022, which was introduced by Councilmember Fukunaga, who provided testimony to the commission yesterday. And let's see, I don't know if I discussed this in subsection E. Okay, so subsection E, turning to subsection E on page 8, the bottom of page 8 of the report. Kakako Industrial Zone under ROH Section 8-10.34. The commission notes that it recommended to maintain the exemption provided under ROH Section 8-10.34, Central Kakako Industrial Zone Limited Development. Upon being apprised of Bill 34, 2022, presently pending before the council, the commission reviewed the measure and supports its passage as it will provide tax relief to additional parcels near Central Kaka'ako designated by the Hawaii Community Development Authority, as well as incorporate additional requirements to qualify for the exemption. That's the extent of what's written. In layman's terms, the proposed bill, Bill 34, essentially there's the existing exemption, and this just expands the applicability of the exemption to other parcels of property that haven't been given the benefit of what HCDA has given other parcels in years past.
I think the current language is appropriate.
If the commission is in line or in agreement with discussing this exemption, then we will need a formal motion to recommend that the recommendation be retained and revised. And the recommendation is to support Bill. Yeah, it's Bill 34, sorry, I'll correct that. Bill 34, and then include the discussion in subsection E. But there would be need to be a formal motion from a commissioner with a second.
So moved as it reflects the subcommittee's earlier recommendation.
Any second?
Second.
Objections?
No
Hearing
objection.
none. Motion so ordered.
Thank you. Turning to the last chart, 8-13.2, the exemption. This is not an exemption, but a credit, RPT credit. Again, this is also based on a recently introduced measure. Hypothetical recommendation for the commission would be to recommend, based on what the bills propose, recommend increases to credit amount to adjust for inflation and statewide property valuations, similar to what was done for the homeowners exemption. This is specific to the real property tax credit, I believe, for low-income individuals, and it's discussed on page, did I say C subsection? Yeah, subsection F. So turning to page 9, top of page 9, subsection F, RPT credit amendment under ROH section 8-13.2. The commission also became aware of 2 bills presently pending before the council that addresses the existing low-income RPT credit available to an owner that is equal to the amount by which the taxes owed for the property exceed 3% of the title holder's income. Taxes owed for the same tax year in which the application is filed for the tax credit exceed 3% of the title holder's combined income for the calendar year immediately preceding. That's very wordy RPAD type language. I don't know if we need all that or if it can be much more layman's terms, but I included the chart of the 2 measures related to the low income RPT credit that are pending before the council are summarized in the following table. The calculation under the existing ROH 8-13.2 is a set monetary threshold, which is $60,000, which means the amount, the combined income of all property title holders to qualify is $60,000. Bill 37 sets it at $70,000. Bill 38 has no set amount. And that is because if you notice the difference between Bill 37 and Bill 38 is that the setting of the real property tax credit for low income individuals, Bill 37 just set the monetary threshold at 70,000. But Bill 38 says, wait, what if we do it a different way? And they are looking at a metric to tie it to, which is even different than what you all discussed with the homeowner's exemption. And in this case, Bill 38 discusses 80% of the area median income for a two-person household in Honolulu per HUD guidelines. And I believe Commissioner Pham hopefully will know what that means. If I can, I'll finish the last paragraph and then Commissioner Pham. The commission believes such a proposal, again, this is all hypothetical. This is not me speaking for you. Commission believes such a proposal to amend ROH section 3-8-13.2, 8-3.2, I believe. Oh, no, 13.2, has merit and also believes, like the homeowner's exemption under ROH section 8-10.4, that additional discussion is needed by the council to determine the best metric to tie this threshold to.
I see Commissioner Pham raising his hand.
I think that Bill 38 is probably what's best. I would be supportive of that being the recommendation from the commission as to, consider Bill 38, just because it is tied to some sort of an adjustment by having it tied to that AMI percentage for the income. Those tables get published every year. Those figures get published every year. They do get adjusted. So, the city council wouldn't have to worry about adjusting a set figure year over year. We also had public testimony supporting using a different threshold instead of a two-person household, maybe a one-person household. I'm indifferent. I just think that, the idea of Bill 38 accomplishes the goal of adjusting this for low-income households and having that be adjusted as there are changing conditions with people's incomes and the cost of goods.
I generally agree with Commissioner Pham that Bill 38 is more flexible, although it is a little bit more difficult for taxpayers to figure out if they qualify from year to year, because that amount will be changing. It's not going to be as if they'll know their paychecks for the next year and they'll be able to calculate whether or not they will qualify for the 60,000 or 70,000 threshold. So I think that even though Bill 38 would introduce that complexity, I think that it's still preferable because it introduces the flexibility and it would require less adjustments in subsequent councils.
I have a question. Does anybody know what 80% of area median income would be right now?
Yes, I have the table pulled up. That is $77,360.
So it would be higher, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, absent further discussion, is there a motion regarding these matters? If it's the language as written or changes, feel free to make that motion, and that needs to be done to approve it.
I move to incorporate the table in subsection F on page 9 of the report. I don't see the first paragraph being necessary, I think that the second paragraph covers that well enough. So I move to strike that first paragraph, keep the second paragraph, and as to the third paragraph, revise as follows. The commission believes both proposals to amend ROH section 8-13.2 have merit, but has a preference for Bill 38 because, like the homeowner's exemption under RO8 section 8-10.4, the flexibility provided by annual adjustments would be beneficial to real property owners.
The flexibility provided by,
The flexibility provided by an annual changing, um, an annual threshold revised for current economic conditions.
How about revised to adjust with current economic conditions?
Perfect. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Second.
Any objections? Hearing no objections, motion ordered. Motion approved, so ordered.
if I can just, and I'll have the recording, but if I can just confirm the sentence, it's, the commission believes both proposals to amend ROH section 8-13.2 have merit, but has a preference for Bill 38, 2022. Like the homeowner's exemption under ROH section 8-10.4, flexibility provided by or through an adjustment.
Annual adjustment.
The flexibility provided by an annual, gosh, what was the sentence again? The flexibility provided by an annual adjustment that reflects current economic conditions is beneficial and in the public interest. Does that make sense? Is that good?
Mhm.
Yeah, sorry, my brain is slowing down. That reflects current economic conditions. Okay.
Yes.
And is beneficial.
And and is beneficial and in the public interest.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
All right, guys. This is Chair. I'm a time check here. Can we? Let's try to, if we can. I know there's a lot on our plate, but still left to go. But let's, and it's very comprehensive and dense. But let's try to condense time where possible here.
Yeah, I think we're close. It looks, there's a lot of pages we've gotten through. So here, let's see how we're doing here. I believe that covers everything for pages all the way through page.
To section G, page 9.
Correct. Okay. Section G, page 9, and we only have 4 more pages to go. Last, $120,000 RPT exemption for long-term leases. Again, this is a matter that was brought up and continued from yesterday as it's a recently introduced measure. Lastly, the commission became aware of Bill 35, 2022, presently pending before the council, that proposes a new section be created in ROH Chapter 8, Article 10, which establishes a $120,000 exemption available to taxpayers that own residential property and provide long-term leases of that property for 1 year or more. Maui County also has a similarly recently enacted long-term lease exemption in their ordinances, and the commission urges the council to evaluate and assess the effectiveness of that exemption on Maui. I can include a hyperlink to that or whatnot, but that's the extent of what I've got for that issue.
So to summarize, we're essentially recommending that we take a look at Maui's law as a model.
I think that's a good recommendation.
Let's move to recommend.
Hold on. I think there should also be an additional sentence similar to what we did earlier in the report regarding the homeowners exemption, since we do reference this as a fuller recommendation in the next section. So the motion would include adding a sentence, should a more comprehensive retiering and restructuring of the residential real property tax classification and rate system be undertaken, the council is urged to consider the possibility of repealing the long-term renters exemption as discussed in greater detail below in section 2. Except I'm not sure if repealing the exemption is really the right way to phrase that, since it's not a standing exemption.
It would just be urged to not consider or not further consider.
Yes, just like that. So that is the motion, to adopt the language and insert that sentence.
Is there a motion
So moved.
to adopt that language as described by Commissioner Pham? I guess Commissioner Aid White, could you read back what you have once you're ready?
I believe as far as what I have, or does Commissioner Pham want to try and reiterate his motion to, because he can make his own motion. It's just a matter of whether it'll be seconded.
Was
Yeah.
that, and that was a motion, Commissioner Pham? Sorry if I missed that.
Yeah, that was a motion. I was just
I
waiting
second.
if someone would second it.
Second.
Can you please read back the sentence, Commissioner Pham?
Yes, the sentence, the additional sentence would read, should a more comprehensive retiering and restructuring of the residential RPT classification and rate system be undertaken, the council is urged to no longer consider the possibility of the long-term lease exemption as discussed in greater detail below in section 2.
I would rephrase, just as a matter of preference, that I would just say the commission notes that a restructuring of the residential rates as contemplated in section 3 would obviate the need for an exemption on long-term leases.
That's a motion. I second Commissioner Wong's
All right.
motion.
Okay, second to that motion to revise the other motion as such. Any objections? Hearing no objections. Motion or approved, so ordered.
Beautiful. Turning to page 10. Is there any, I'll read it, and then the credits and exemptions subcommittee can chime in, or whoever wants to, but this needs to be strengthened a bit. The commission recognizes that the total amount of revenue loss from RPT credits and exemptions is relatively small in comparison to the city's overall operating budget. As discussed above, though, there are certain exemptions that fundamentally impact individual taxpayers and are foundational cornerstones of an equitable and efficient RPT system. It is important that these exemptions remain updated and not outdated.
No objection.
If no objections, let's move.
Moving on, section 3, page 10. Recommendation to review, revise, and restructure the existing residential RPT classification. The commission recommends the council consider the following actions. 1, eliminate the homeowner's exemption, and I'll technically revise it to be under ROH, yada, yada, yada. 2, eliminate the residential classification. 3, eliminate the residential A classification and associated tiered rates. 4, implement residential owner-occupied classification and 4-tier rates based on annual quartiles of the RPA devaluations. And 5, implement residential long-term rental classification and 4-tier rates based on annual quartiles of the RPA devaluations.
No objection.
No objections. Any objections? Pretty substantive part of our recommendation. Are there no objections?
Give me one moment. I just want to look over something. I'm sorry.
And the only comment, well, Vice Chair is contemplating, if Commissioner Pham could just clarify or provide his insight. We go from recommending revision to the homeowner's exemption, and I don't know whether it's the language that we need to tinker with, but the next section, we're coming in and saying, we recommend eliminating the homeowner's exemption. I don't know if we need to put any qualifier on there or if it's straightforward enough to the normal person. But for me, I don't know if there's a disconnect as to, we recommend revising the homeowner's exemption, then now we're recommending repealing it.
I think we have to say something to the effect where our recommendation is all of those things together, and like non-severability, I think is the legal term. And I'm not a lawyer, but like we would only eliminate the homeowner's exemption if this full re-tiering recommendation was undertaken, correct?
Yes.
Right. I agree with Commissioner Nate White. That was my concern here, is that we seem like we're speaking out of both ends of our mouth without any qualifiers. I think that some sort of prelude indicating that the commission or the subcommittee at the very least examined a wholesale restructuring of the existing residential RPT classifications to implement use considerations for classification instead of the current highest and best use. If the council is so inclined, it should consider the revision and restructuring of the classification system based on the Maui system, I think, is what really led us to consider this, right? I think that was the prompt.
Yeah.
I think some kind of prelude along those lines would go a long way towards clearing up the confusion in reading the report.
Yes. And another way to maybe phrase that first point, because I do understand the strength of the word eliminate there, just may get the wrong idea. That effectively what's happening is your homeowner's exemption is no longer a dollar amount. Instead, your exemption entitles you to a different set of lower rates. So it's like a replacement of a homeowner's exemption with the different rate schedule. But perhaps, yes, that the insertion of a paragraph before this to explain that and explain that these ideas are all tied together could fix that as well.
I think after a little more reading, I think subsection A is a good lead in to the actual recommendations. I think that discussion is a good prelude.
So just reorder this to have section A, have the paragraph in section A be the prelude to those 5 recommendations.
I think that's appropriate.
I think that captures it.
Yeah. And then to move the actual recommendations, I think to the final paragraph to the final paragraph in section A. I think that makes it clear that we lay out what we're talking about, and it isn't quite as contradictory, or doesn't appear that way. It's a little clearer. I guess the formal motion would be to move the portion of section 3 not included in section A to the end as the final paragraph of section A.
Second.
Objections?
No
Seeing no-
objection. And to
So ordered.
confirm, Vice Chair Wong, that the moved section above the existing section B, which is the commission recommends we can put in a subject header or a header that says commission recommendations or something to that effect. But is there a motion to include the revised language that you were discussing regarding totality, and I believe Commissioner Pham referenced replacement of the homeowner. I don't know if he wants to keep the replacement of the homeowner stuff, but Commissioner or Vice Chair Wong, you indicated the need for kind of softening to be non-severable in totality, and then you went into discussion of, instead of the highest and best use, if the council is so inclined, they should look to the Maui restructuring, and then that goes right into Maui, I believe.
I think moving the language between the section 3 header and subsection A, I think is an insert prior to the commission recommends. If such a restructuring is attempted, the commission recommends the council consider the following actions.
Is
Or-
there a second?
Second.
Any objections? Hearing or seeing no objections, motion approved, so ordered.
Okay, turning to page 11. We are good also with the first paragraph on page 11. I don't believe I read that. Do you, I should read it because there is hyphens. The commission does not recommend using either the US HUD, Hawaii HHFDC annually published income guideline tables discussed as a viable index with the ability to set tiers according to the home prices affordable at varying income levels, or the Honolulu Board of Realtors sale prices discussed as a popular metric with quarterly publication, but data only reflects market sales prices. This was the basis for the percentile-based tiering recommendation. Is that paragraph still necessary or wanted by the subcommittee, or yeah?
Yes, I think that absolutely should stay in because that's how we ended up on the quartiles. We were going in circles in our discussion about, well, if you source the Board of Realtors, then it's not tied to what's actually happening with all the values. It's only talking about sales and just the volatility of setting the dollar amounts. That's what we want with the quartiles, that way we could have that closed loop. So I think it's important to keep that in there, that those were discussed but rolled out.
Any discussion or objection?
Notwithstanding my objections yesterday to the recommendations to begin with, I think it accurately reflects the consensus of the commission, and I'll leave it at that.
And Commissioner Pham, I may make some technical, like stylistic changes to it, but the substance will remain the same, and I'll double check those stylistic changes with you just to make sure that it's very clear. Turning to page 11, subsection B, and then the question for the commission to think about is whether subsection B, which should be C on page 13, should actually be moved up and subsection B become subsection C, but I'll leave that to you all. Modeling shows possibility for limited disparity and greater equity. I just made that header up, so if more intelligent individuals on this commission wish to change that, please indicate so. The example provided in this report tiers by quartiles, but the city could determine that other cutoffs for percentile-based tiers may be more equitable. In data provided by the RPAD, the commission requested a data set. 1, combining all residential and residential A properties into a single data set. 2, sorting this data set from lowest tax assessed value to highest value. 3, dividing the sorted data set into 4 equal quartiles. And 4, providing a summary of the data set, including range of values for each quartile. RPAD provided the following table in summary, noting there were 277,728 properties included in the data set with a median value of $784,000 and a mean value of $885,648. The table is as presented. I have confirmed its accuracy, cross-referenced with what was provided by RPAD. The provided data is compared to the example schedule of residential tiered rates presented in the written report from the Subcommittee on Rates and Classifications. The example rate schedule is included below, followed by 4 example properties. And I don't know if properties are situations, but I'll leave it open to discussion.
So the fourth quartile, in our view, is exempted, that does not get a homeowner's exemption, or, right? Is that what we're saying?
No.
It's the tiers. I see the tiers. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep, I got it. Thank you. It's obsessed to the tiers.
I have no objections to what Commissioner White just read.
Vice Chair, you good? Okay. I will continue. If there's further comments, just feel free to stop me. Bottom of page 11, the proposed rate schedule is a chart created by Vice Chair Pham or Commissioner Pham. It notes the quartile values that match up with what RPAD provided. Turning the page to page 12, it's just a repeat of the header of the chart, including the various rates. And then from this point, Commissioner Pham and the Subcommittee on Rates and Classifications has provided 4 examples. And I do want to clarify, on page 11, Commissioner Pham, is it followed by 4 example properties or 4 example situations or 4 examples? Or are you happy with the language you had, 4 example properties?
I think situations might be better, or you could just say 4 examples, Pierre.
4 example RPT situations, real property tax situations?
Yes.
Okay. The examples, I think, I'm not going to go through and read all of this math stuff because I'm an attorney and not good at math. But I think the question is, visually, please advise how you would like it to look. Bolds, underlines, if you want it in a chart, I can do that. I think the importance of difference that's highlighted and italicized under each example is relevant. I've bolded the amount of each tax. But if
Who did these? Did RPAD do these calculations?
No, I drafted these after our discussion yesterday. And so
Have you had a second set of eyes redo the calculations?
I would say no.
All
Well,
right.
Well, he can do them as long as the examples are there. Commissioner Pham can have a second set of eyes. I'm not in any worry about verifying the math right now because he can verify the math with somebody and just let me know it's confirmed. I think it's largely just kind of the optics of how if this is the best way you want it presented, this information.
I have no objections to this. I think it reads well from my standpoint. I get it from my individual standpoint. My only concern is the the checking of the math, because it's a lot of numbers, a lot of takes. You know what I mean? You always want more than one set of eyes on numbers when you're putting them in a report.
That's fine with me too. As long as on the condition that we double check our arithmetic here, I think we're okay.
Okay.
I think there's one thing to add to the proposed rate schedule portion, or the title before the schedule. is as presented in the Subcommittee on Rates and Classifications, March the 7th, 2022 written report, or whenever that report was.
Okay.
Just so that you know that we're not proposing a rate schedule, that it was just an example.
It's
Understood.
a stylistic example of
Yeah.
a stylistic notional recommendation or example.
Yeah, and that it's coming from that written
Yeah.
report from the subcommittee.
I
Correct.
think it's a good idea.
I know what you're referring to, and I'll directly reference it. Returning to page 13 after the 4 examples, the commission.
Hey, may I ask, can I go back real quick?
Yes.
Commissioner Pham, is this coming from a spreadsheet? The
Yes.
calculations? Maybe you can share that spreadsheet with us and we can help you double check your work.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay.
Page 13, the commission acknowledges this recommendation would require methods for determining the data set to ensure equity for high-value residential properties with multiple rental dwelling units. For example, this would ensure that on a per dwelling unit basis, a property of a single owner with 10 renters and 10 units is treated the same as the individual owners of a single 10-unit condominium. The underlying reason for considering this comprehensive residential property tax restructuring is to offer the city council additional flexibility when setting property tax rates to meet budgetary needs or to provide targeted property tax relief. No comments?
This is Commissioner Peters. I just had one question. I guess I'm getting one paragraph ahead of you, but it's Commissioner Pham, you know, in section B where it has Maui County as a model for comparison, the third paragraph says tax rates are subject to changes and may vary from those provided in example chart as recommendation. Would it sound better if that was in the previous section that we're discussing now? Because it seems like B is about Maui County as a model for comparison, and it gets into Maui County, but I think that last paragraph seems to fit better into the previous section. What do you think?
Yes, that I think that language probably just got lifted from a previous writing, but yeah, reorganizing it up there makes a lot of sense.
And what's the reorganization? I also have a personal opinion that I'm not sure if it seems to you, but the Maui County placeholder I put in there as a model for comparison, it seems to stick out awkwardly. I don't know if it should be enmeshed somewhere else, or I think you're specifically discussing the third paragraph of what's noted as subsection B. Where do you want that third paragraph to go, or do we want to move this whole Maui County thing into somewhere else, or is it fine where it is?
I think that the currently titled subsection B, Maui County as a model for comparison, is more of a prefatory section. I think it provides context. I would prefer that it be somewhere in section A.
Yeah, so I think taking the first 2 paragraphs of that subsection and moving them to subsection A, and then taking that third paragraph and moving it ahead of the proposed rate schedule table in subsection B.
If that's a motion, I'll second that.
And to confirm what Commissioner Pham just said regarding that third paragraph, you're suggesting the third paragraph of what is noted as B, Maui County as a model for comparison. Where is that third paragraph going? Above the proposed rate schedule?
Hey, may I ask, can you guys hear me? I'm having technical, okay, I see that you can. Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Pham, I'm just asking where, I didn't hear where you wanted that third paragraph to go.
Yeah, I initially said above the proposed rate schedule, but maybe it needs to go below it.
Okay.
What do you think
Above the
about putting it
examples.
right after the 4 examples?
Right after or before, did you say?
I mean, I'm just throwing that out there.
I
I
think
defer to Commissioner
Yeah.
Pham, to our
Yeah.
subcommittee.
Yeah, I think that makes sense as well, Commissioner Peters. So yeah, after the 4 examples.
Above the commission acknowledges.
Yes.
I believe there's a motion and a second that was clarified. Chair, you can move for the approval.
Motion approved, so ordered.
Okay.
Sorry, hold on. Let me reverse that. Sorry, I jumped ahead. Are there any objections? Hearing none, seeing none. Motion so ordered. Approved.
Is there a need for a summary conclusion on page 13?
I do not believe that a summary conclusion is necessary.
Motion to
I
strike,
concur. Strike.
Second,
seconded. Any discussion?
Hearing none, seeing none. Next.
Okay, turning to page 14, last section. Section 4, follow-up comments on ORPTAC's 2021 interim report. The commission still believes that the evaluation, assessment, and appellate processes of the RPAD within the city's Department of Budget and Fiscal Services could and should be more transparent and easily understandable to members of the general public and the taxpayers for whom they serve. The commission reiterates its recommendation that the RPAD develop a plan and budget to modernize its systems to be more efficient, clear, and transparent, user-friendly, and taxpayer-focused. We also suggest redoubling efforts in identifying funds from city, state, and federal sources, as well as new potential administrative revenue sources to facilitate continued efforts towards modernization. The commission appreciates the council's introduction and consideration of multiple measures related to recommendations from its interim report. Comments?
Any discussion? I'm seeing no discussion.
Continuing on to the chart, I lay out Bill 3, Bill 6, and Bill 9, the descriptions of them, valuation transparency, valuation public info and transparency, and the empty homes tax, including comments noting for Bill 3, specifies notices of assessment shall set forth an explanation in clear and descriptive language of the valuation, including at a minimum market data approach factors and cost approach factors utilized to calculate the valuation. Comments for Bill 6, requires Director of BFS to provide particularized information on city website to educate and fully inform public about valuation process and appeals. Allows for income approach to be used as appropriate for real property classified as commercial, industrial, or hotel and resort. Comments for Bill 9, empty homes tax proposal, as supported by ORPTAC, with 2 key changes or slash concerns. Section 8, subsection 1, definition of empty home, and 2, section 8, subsection 3, placement of revenues. Final paragraph on page 15, the commission stands by its recommendation to implement a supplemental empty homes tax upon vacant residential properties and reiterates the testimony it provided to the council's budget committee on March 1st, 2022 in council communication number 65. I'm wondering if that last paragraph should just go up above the chart and above the commission appreciates. Basically, we talk about the valuation, redoubling efforts, modernization, and then the empty homes tax, and then the commission appreciates.
I think that works.
Okay, can I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
second,
Any objections?
Hearing none, motion moved, so moved, approved.
Okay.
Now,
The only question as far as after that restructuring would be that we are ending with this chart, or do we want to add any sentence in? The commission appreciates the council's introduction and consideration of multiple measures related to recommendations from its interim report. and hopes
and endorses,
and endorses their enactment.
I believe, yeah, that's good. I think that's accurately reflective of the commission's decisions and recommendations.
Okay, any objection to and endorses their enactment or passage and enactment? No.
Hearing, passage, and enactment. Passage and enactment's fine.
Okay, then that
Works for me.
that leaves the conclusion, which is not
I got this one. I got this one.
okay.
Hold on. Let me find this. Commissioners, may I have a motion to formally and finally approve the final report as we just edited it to be transmitted from the commission to the council?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Are there any objections? Absent objection to this motion, do we have unanimous consent to approve this recommendation as discussed?
Yes, we do, Chair.
Hearing no objections, motion approved. So ordered.
Thank you, Chair. One last clarifying comment, not to steal your thunder. On page 15, the conclusion, should it just be that second paragraph and we just strike the first paragraph with the highlighting, just basically say the commission submits this report?
I would agree with that. Motion to strike the first paragraph, the conclusion.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
I thought we did the conclusion. That's why we're striking that. It's because we did the conclusion.
So we're good with just that second kind of
Yeah.
paragraph? Everybody good with that? No objections? Okay. Continue on, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. So, are there any comments from commissioners? I'd just like to say, from my standpoint, it's been a really gratifying and rewarding experience working with this commission on these really complicated, comprehensive, and really important issues for the city. These are really hard issues to deal with. And I just want to say to each and every one of you, thank you for your time. Thank you for your good faith efforts throughout this entire process. Really appreciate all that you've done and respect everything that you've done. And I really am proud of working with you and of providing this report to commission, to the council. So thank you from my standpoint.
Thank you, Chair Mold. I'll echo those remarks. Just want to thank you for being chair. Thank you for your hard work and for helping us move this process along. It couldn't have been easy with all of the logistics and COVID issues that we've had to deal with. We've really worked out a good product, I believe. And also wanted to thank Commissioner White for his help and assistance. He's been invaluable to this process and getting our agendas and our materials ready for us and just making us look smarter than we are here. So thank you, Commissioner White.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate that. And Commissioner Aide White has been invaluable in this entire process. And it's been just a pleasure to work with you, George. And thanks for everything that you've done to move the ball forward and, improve and better the public interest.
The feeling is mutual to each and every one of you. I have appreciated getting to know each and every one of you. You are each individually have numerous qualities that are admirable, and I enjoyed interacting and working for you, and hope to continue to interact. And you feel free to always call or email or whatnot. I'm always available, and I appreciated the opportunity to work with you all.
Thank you, everyone. Any further business for today?
No further business here. I formally move to adjourn today's meeting.
There being no further business today, is there a second?
Second.
There being any objections? There being no objections, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice work. Have a great evening, everyone, and hope to see you guys in person